Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I have a few reminders while folks are still joining before we go ahead and get started. We like to keep our webinars conversational and we welcome your questions throughout. You can send your questions for our panelists through the Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. We will try to answer as many questions as we can live, but if we don't get to your questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. You can also chat with other members of the audience by using the chat feature. Finally, we will send a link out to the webinar recording within the next 24 hours. So look out for a follow-up email from our marketing team. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Each year, Darren Shaw surveys the top experts in local search across many topics to determine what's working to drive rankings and conversions in local SEO and what's not. The 2023 survey had 149 potential factors that local search experts believe Google might use to rank businesses in the local pack finder, maps, and local organic results. These factors are based on over a decade of analysis, experience, research, and local experts testing their various hypotheses when it comes to the specific signals Google is using to evaluate and rank businesses. Ben and Colin, who we have on today's call, were two of the contributors to this year's surveys. So we thought it would be great to have them on today's webinar as well to share their expertise and knowledge, and our very own Joel Headley. My name is Chelsea Alves. I am the Senior Content Marketing Specialist at Rio SEO, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Joining me for today's discussion are Ben Fisher, co-founder and lead consultant at Steady Demand, Colin Nielsen, Vice President, Local Search at Sterling Sky Inc., and Joel Headley, Vice President of Product Management at Rio SEO in Forsta. I'll have each of you briefly introduce yourselves and your background. Ben, how about we start off with you?
Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks for having me. Hi, Ben Fisher, started in SEO in 1994. I am a Google Business Profile Diamond product expert. And been doing heavily in SEO, local SEO for the past, I don't know, I think 9 years, something like that. And Steady Demand, we focus on Google Business Profiles and everything that has to do with local SEO.
Awesome, thank you. Colin, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Chelsea. My name's Colin. Been doing local search specifically for almost 14 years now. I'm a product expert at the Google Business Profile Forum, also faculty member over at the local university group, and yeah, just love local SEO, love doing it as a career, and really hope to be doing it for the rest of my life, to be honest with you.
Great, and then last but not least, Joel.
Yeah, I won't talk about my years of experience, but suffice it to say, I remember both Ben and Colin starting in local SEO when I was back working at Google and launching some of these products with the product team. But yeah, I had previously worked on Google and worked on local products and search products there. And also have had work at startups, including in messaging at Leadferno and Patient Pop, which is now Tebra, that has done some patient experience work, and now have continued that work in local at Rio SEO and here at PG Forsta in patient experience. So very excited to talk about local here with you all today.
Amazing. Thank you all for those introductions. So to start today's discussion off, we're going to launch a quick poll to find out what you're most interested in learning about today. I'll give you a minute to respond. There are 6 different options to choose from. Choose the most popular or your favorite response, and I'll give it a second and see what the results are. Okay, I'll give it maybe 2 more seconds, and then we can close the poll. All right, awesome. Well, the good news is we will be discussing all of these factors in today's webinar, and it looks like people are very interested in all of the above. Most of you chose that response. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into each of these topics. All right. First, we're going to be discussing local pack finder ranking factors that have changes over time. In this year's study, when observing a ranking factor group change over time, we see a drop in Google business profile signals and link signals. Colin, I'll direct this question to you first. Why do you think these signals experienced a great decrease compared to 2021 and even 2020? For GBP and link signals specifically.
Sure. So one thing that could factor into this and potentially other things as well, and Darren's talked about this in some interviews I've listened to, the formatting was a little bit different this year, which to some degree contributed to certain things sort of appearing like maybe they were more important or less important compared to the year before. So I think that's just worth keeping in mind. With that said, I would say the reason why seemingly the majority of people would indicate that GBP is less. I don't think it's that they're saying that GBP is less, but I think some of the votes, if you will, were more going towards on-site signals as they relate specifically to local pack rankings. So I think that's part of it. I think part of it was not saying that GBP is less important, but actually on-site signals are increasing in importance. Personally, I did not vote GBP as being lesser important this year. I actually voted it having an increased impact. And I think one specific thing, for instance, you could point out, there was a whole new ranking factor that we kind of discovered around the time of this survey related to GBP services. So you could say like, hey, there was actually things in this survey that last year did not even impact ranking. So I'd say overall it actually increased, at least as far as I put my votes in.
Right, I think that's a good response. And yeah, we continuously see Google add new features to GBP as well. So I think that's something that's going to remain very important for years to come, even if the experts thought it was a little less important this year. All right, let's move on to local pack finder ranking factors. Looking at local pack finder ranking factors, we see quite a few GBP related factors influence ranking along with proximity of the searcher. We also see a lot of review related factors are influencing ranking, such as the quantity of native Google reviews with text. Ben, I'll ask you this question. Do you have any advice for brands on how to build the review profile authentically and in a way that won't violate Google's guidelines? And do you have any recommendations for building a sustained influx over time?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the thing is that I'm going to actually answer probably the last part most, and that is how to build it sustained over time, right? Because a lot of people do have problems with this. I always say, ask somebody for a review when they are at their happiest. For instance, when you look at personal injury, a lot of companies will think that when that person gets that check in their hand, that's actually when they're at their happiest. But actually, in reality, from what we found out, is that they are happy when they find out that they've gotten their judgment. Because when they find out and get their judgment, then they go out and they spend all this money. And then when they actually get their check, all they're doing is paying off all their credit card debt. So they're actually not very happy at that point. So you're least likely to get a review. And when we look at like the services-based industry, like HVAC or plumbers, et cetera, on site, when somebody has just gotten their job done, they're happy with the service, they're happy with the price, having somebody, the tech basically ask for that review at that time, that's also key. And also rewarding your techs basically with, $50, for instance, for getting a 5-star review. Now they can't ask for a 5-star review, but rewarding them or even just for getting that review itself. That's not a violation because you're giving it to the tech, you're not giving it to the customer. So yeah, those are the things I would say is you kind of just, again, look at when somebody's at their happiest, and that's when you should be asking for the review.
Thanks for that, Ben. Sticking with the theme of local pack and finder, it was noted in this year's study that keywords in native Google reviews had a 278% decrease compared to the 2021 study, which I think is worthy of pointing out. Joel, why do you think that is, and should brands no longer care about keywords and review content?
People should care. There's a number of reasons to care. One, I think it matters when there's some social proof there, right? People are reading reviews. We know people read reviews. So if someone reads a review and sees a keyword in it, it's probably going to help your conversion efforts. And while there have been some studies that show some keywords don't necessarily have an immediate impact on ranking, I still in my gut believe that over time it's going to matter. So I don't want to necessarily contradict some studies from some organizations on the phone, but I think over time some of that's going to matter. That content's going to matter. That said, I think you're going to see the flip side of that is that we've seen a lot of aggressive removal of reviews by Google recently. And I think part of what's going on in terms of a decrease of keywords mattering in reviews is also a result of how Google has been treating a lot of review spam recently. So there's two ways Google can attack review spam. One of it is just to remove it, right? And the other is to not make it count so much for search. And so so if you have someone spam 300 reviews to a listing and add a bunch of keywords, if you're not showing that listing in search, Google doesn't care too much about it. So that's one way it can avoid having those so if keywords show up immediately the moment you send a review in, or in the first month that you send in a review, you're going to that listing is going to carry a lot of weight. But if Google says, okay, I'm not going to show this listing with keywords very quickly, it's not going to have a lot of weight. So I think a good sustained progress, kind of what some of the things Ben was saying, over time is going to matter. Having the right keywords in there, one, so that people, writing for humans always matters so that people can read it. And as machines read it and digest that, and that's something that on a long-lived strategy, I think it's going to matter. But I think some of the things the machines are doing so that instant things can happen, or even short-term things can happen, we won't see a great impact in immediate, but I think over time it's going to matter.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think all this, points to the importance of proactive online reputation management and just how important reviews are, consistently monitoring them, consistently asking your customers for them, and responding to positive and negative reviews as they come in. But let's move on now to local organic ranking factors. As we can see here in this slide, this year, links play a large role in local organic ranking factors. However, having a dedicated page for each service came in at the top. Obviously, this can be a very time-consuming endeavor. Ben, I'll ask you this question. For businesses that haven't started this effort yet, but are looking to get started, what recommendations do you have for building out service pages?
So we deal with this a lot, especially when we're dealing with like franchises, for instance, and other enterprises. And it can get maddening because, you could have, say, I don't know, 500 locations. They all have the same type of service. So yeah, how do you handle that at scale, basically? And traditionally, a lot of what most have done in the past is they'll go ahead and they'll just create the same service page and then just change the geo area. And, there you go. It's service in Houston now. This doesn't work, obviously. It doesn't work very well. And so one of the things that I say is, A, build service pages that make sense. And B, on top of that is, at your location, listen to your sales team, listen to your support team, and gather the frequently asked questions that you're getting on a regular basis. And you can add that content. That's going to add a lot of unique content to these service pages. And basically just design them for the user. Don't just design them for Google, basically, I guess is the biggest thing. And then on top of that, we're going to be talking about AI later, but use AI for some ideation. Don't use it to write the content itself. I'm not a fan of that personally, but use it to help generate ideas. And that way you can start to build out these service pages, and it's just not going to be that much of a pain.
We actually had a question come in that relates to this, so I'm going to address it now. One of our attendees asked, for service-based businesses, are the services listed under Google Business Profile, do they matter? So
For services? Oh, absolutely. Colin, why don't you speak to this? You guys did it. You did the first study.
Yeah, it definitely depends if they're referring to the service areas that you can input or the actual services. One matters more than the other, certainly as far as the ranking algorithm goes. So if you're talking about putting in your actual services that you offer, very important for sure.
Yeah. I mean, both matter. They matter in different ways, right? So the services that you offer matter in terms of how you match to keywords. The services matter in where you match, right? One is a proximity, right? So we've seen instances in the market where people have changed from being service area businesses to having specific locations, and their entire search dynamics change, right? Because they have been once ranking for those service areas in totally different markets, and now they become a very narrow business in a very specific area, because now they're ranking for that very specific address. Or they're ranking very well for a specific address, and they go to service areas and they drop in ranking because now they're ranking against, now they're competing in a different so-called market or area. So they have very different impacts and flavors on what happens to your business. So one is proximity and one is relevance, right? They touch different legs of the three-pronged stool of local search.
great. Yeah, I think that answers that question. So we'll move on to the next part of the study, which is local SEO myths, which is probably one of my favorite topics because there always seems to be new myths popping up here and there, and there are a plethora of them out there. So I'll direct this question to Colin. What is the top local SEO myth that you'd personally like to dispel in this year's study?
Yeah, I would like to think that most myths have been kind of disproven at this point. I find a lot of agencies and SEO consultants have been doing really good like studies and testing over the last couple of years, where whenever these things come up, somebody will do some testing, they'll sort of prove that it doesn't work. But I mean, there's definitely some people out there that still like to continue to sell these things because they sound good. You can package them. Business owner doesn't know any better. Geotagged images is probably still something that's in that camp. It's the only one that really comes to mind that I would say I still see on a regular basis, either people asking at forums whether or not this still ranks because somebody's telling me I should be doing this, and like, should I be doing this? I'd love to hear what Ben and Joel think, but that's definitely the one that it still seems to be lingering out there. Yeah.
I agree. Geotagging and EXIF data is probably the most annoying SEO myth that's out there. I had one of our very large white label clients this morning asking me about geotagging and EXIF data, and I was just like, "You've got to be kidding me." I was like, "Really?" But on top of that, I will add that keywords in all the things. People ask me like, it's like when we go to start do optimization on a GBP, we'll see keywords in the labels, or in the tags. or in review responses, all over the place. Descriptions, we get questions. Hey, should we put our keywords in our descriptions? Is that going to help us rank? It's like, no, it's not going to help you rank. There's only 3 or 4 levers in GBP that are going to help you rank. So don't worry about it. But people constantly do it. They try to put keywords in their Google Business Profile posts. It's just like, it doesn't work. So don't stress out over it. That would be my keywords.
Joel, do you have anything?
Yeah, you kind of think of what are the things that really move the needle, and things that Google doesn't want you easily to move the needle, right? And things that really move the needle would be things that, in general, a business owner can't change, right? And those would be external signals, or things that users create. So reviews, location, and link signals, right? Now, in some cases, a business owner can change it, but they think it's not really, it's very factual. So business name, right? That kind of service, category, right? And I think this is where it gets a little squishy. Like, I can change my business name to get a little bit, add a keyword in there, or I can add more services so that I can get better ranking in this area. So that's where it gets a little squishy, where it's obviously not useful is I can add stuff in my description. Google totally discounts that. Where the myths really become a big deal is where it feels technical enough that a business owner can't understand it, and some yokel can feel like they can charge for it to mess with them, right? And so this is why geotagged photos is always top of the list, because someone says something like EXIF data and someone goes, what? Metadata? I don't know what that means. And says, well, I'll charge you $50 for every photo I do this to, and it'll improve your ranking, right? Or I will rewrite your description with this mystical keywords so that it will rank better. And because I make it a mystical process. So that's really where it irks real legitimate players in the field, that they take this idea of I'm going to make things more complicated than they are, make things harder than they are. They're really quite simple and they don't matter. So when things get complicated, I'm going to make things more complicated than they are and try to scam. That's where SEOs get upset, and that's why things race to the top. But think about non-factual data that I can mess with is probably not going to have very much impact on the listing. Very factual data is going to have the most impact on the listing, or stuff that is third party to me is going to have the most impact on the listing.
Great, thanks guys. Let's move on to the next topic. A new one for this year's study: local services ads ranking factors. So as I just stated, local services ads are a new ranking factor to this year's study, and we've been hearing more interest in them recently as well. Ben, what guidance do you have for creating LSAs or local services ads, and what industry should be taking advantage of this opportunity?
Sure. So as far as who should be taking advantage of the opportunity, I'm basically going to actually lay it out there and just say anybody who can qualify, anybody who's in the category list, especially when they roll out new categories. An example of that is they rolled it out to dentists in January, and now they rolled it out into more healthcare related industries. It's going to continue to roll out to more healthcare related industries. So, right now it's like the early 1990s when AdWords was first around. It's really inexpensive. That being said, if you're in personal injury, and let's say you're in California, you might want to actually think twice about it. Yes, turn it on, try it. But, as an example, I was talking to one of my clients yesterday, and they were just like, yeah, LSA is okay, He's like, but really, when you look at it and you look at the number of cases that we get and the number of cases that we actually close, the amount of profit that they're actually making is almost break even. So it's just bringing in a client and they're actually not making a lot of money off of it. So it's almost not worth it for them. And I hear this, unfortunately, very often. But then again, in other law categories, it's very useful. The number one tip I would give about creating a local services ads profile is where it comes to the background check. The hardest part is basically getting your staff to complete all of these background checks. So let's say you have an HVAC company and you've got 30 techs. Well, now you have to wait until every single one of them has done to pass basically the background check. It can take a very long time. So one of the things that we recommend is you basically war room it. You have everybody get into almost like a classroom. You have everybody sit down at the same time, send them their links, and have everybody fill it out. Nobody leaves the room until it's done. And if you do this, then what you're going to find out is that you'll be able to pass your LSA verification usually within less than a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So that would be probably the biggest thing I would recommend. And then finally, on top of that is the optimization of the profile itself. Definitely look at your competitors because, as it states, number of reviews and your rating, by the way, should actually be up there right above, second to that, is extremely important. It's very easily gamed, unfortunately, because verified reviews are really not verified. But it is a ranking factor. So if somebody has 2,000 reviews and you have 1,000 reviews and they play with their internal settings as far as budget and bid goes, then they are going to absolutely outrank you. So it is something that needs to be done.
Thanks, Ben. That was a lot of really great, helpful information. Next, we're going to dive into a topic that's very popular right now. Everyone's talking about AI, and so too was Whitespark in this year's study. So yes, it's basically been since the announcement of ChatGPT that there's been so much buzz around AI, and it seems nearly everyone is jumping on board the AI train. In this year's study, we see a lot of SEOs are using AI to create content, which is then edited by a human, and content inspiration and ideation. I'll actually ask this to Joel first, and Ben and Colin, feel free to add your 2 cents here as well. Joel, what has been your primary usage for AI?
So we've used it more as a way to understand feedback from customers so that the business now can action it and improve their business. So take in all that data, right, from your reviews, from your surveys, for example, what we do a lot. Take in all that information from the experiences people are having in local, and now analyze that information, understand the sentiment behind it, understand why people are having great experiences, double down on those great experiences, understand why people are having poor experiences and fix them, and then roll that back into the business so that the business can improve and leverage those great experiences, highlight them, and really create improved experiences for your customers. So that's really, I think, the first place you can start when you think about what does it mean to use AI. Really simplify your business. Don't have to comb through, when you're talking about brands that have hundreds or thousands of locations across the US, for a brand manager to comb through every piece of feedback can be really hard. But you can have AI do that for you and then bring up the stuff that's most important. Hey, this one person does need to be addressed. But there might be hundreds of positive comments that says, hey, you know what? You actually have a standout location that must be doing something really right because it's standing out above all your other locations. Go talk to that store manager, figure out what they're doing special, and then roll that out to the rest of your other franchisees because they're doing something special there. So that's one really great use for AI to make sure that you can just make your business better.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great point. We recently actually had a client who started doing this. They're a fast casual Mexican food restaurant, and their overall star rating was at a 4.2, and they were able to kind of analyze what people were saying and the negative feedback they were receiving using AI. And in the matter of, I think it was a month to 3 months, they were able to boost the rating to 4.4 stars overall. So a 0.2% or a 0.2 change over just a couple months is great. And it just speaks to the importance of using AI to kind of glean that feedback and make operational changes. But Ben and Colin, do you have any thoughts on this, or what's been your primary usage for AI?
Sure. I'll start off with one thing I want to see in next year's survey, Darren, if you're listening. No, I told Darren this, is replacing, adding actually a factor in here, because creating content which is then edited by a human sounds wonderful, right? And that is in an ideal world. But let's be realistic about this. Most marketers are lazy. Most business owners are lazy. And so there needs to be another option here, which is just creating content. My gut says is if you just had that, it would actually rise to be number one. And, but that's where we need to worry actually is where users are just creating content with just AI. And the same thing comes with responding to reviews, by the way, just to branch into that very quickly. I think responding to reviews with AI is fine. However, they must be trained on your voice, your brand, and more importantly, they have to be edited. Because obviously, eventually, if you think about it, then people will start writing reviews with AI, and then people will respond to reviews with AI. And it'll just be AI talking to AI back and forth, back and forth. It becomes kind of useless for the consumer. So we try to keep that in mind at Steady Demand with everything that we use AI for. Is it going to be an AI to AI thing, or is it going to be AI that's going to be useful for the actual user and the business owner? And we do use it in a couple things, when it comes to like content ideation, or trying to just do research in general. For instance, I just want to share, one prompt that we use to actually generate services, or at least ideas for adding services for GBPs. And the prompt goes like this: act like an SEO expert. I want you to generate a list of services that we put in a URL for the customer, may offer. For each of those services, include keyword search volume and sort them in ascending order. Automatically create up to a 300-character description for each service item, and each service item that you list must make sense in the following sentence: provides, colon. An example of this would be provides HVAC/emergency services. If you put this into ChatGPT, it actually spits out some really bad formatted data. If you put it into Bing search, it doesn't even understand what you're trying to do. You put it into Bard, it puts out an amazing table actually. And it's pulling the search data from Keyword Planner. So it comes back, it's very useful, and it cuts down an amazing amount of time to do all that manual research. What about you, Colin?
Yeah, so speaking of provides, so Ben, what Ben's referring to there is the justification that services kind of push into the local pack. I can't remember the name of the person who tweeted this. If anybody remembers, please put it into the chat. Somebody tweeted, I think it was last week or the week before, that they were using ChatGPT to put in a prompt and list a business's services, and then ask for the tool to provide emojis that are relevant to each one of those services. And I thought this was genius. So they put in like 15 different services, spit out emojis for each one of those 15 services. And for anyone that doesn't know, if you feel like testing some stuff, the custom services that you can add, not the predefined ones, you can get emojis into those, and they'll actually get pulled in with the justification into the local pack. So, if you're up for testing stuff like that, or you have other uses for emojis, and you don't want to be going and taking time to look up specific emojis, that's a really good use case. I found that to be useful. One other thing we've been using it for is trying to figure out logical ways to get proximity type keywords into content. So think of things like near me, near you, around my area, in my neighborhood. Give it a prompt, ask it to help you bake in the word near me or the word near you into a particular paragraph. And it's pretty decent at doing those types of things as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so crazy how AI is just taking over and there's so many use cases for it and how helpful it's been. All right, let's get into some of the summary questions. These are kind of just going to be like overarching questions that are broader to the study as a whole. I'll start with Colin. The first question that I have is, are there any factors not included in the study this year that you think should be added?
Yeah, and I'm actually so glad Joel's here for this one, because I'm curious what he thinks. And I've actually DM'd with Darren about this as well. And if anyone, if you look at a local pack, there's always been filters in the local pack. So you can filter by, I only want to see businesses that have 4 reviews, a 4 average rating or higher. More recently, there's like Medicare, Medicaid filters. So you can filter to only show you businesses that have selected Medicaid or Medicare as part of like one of the insurance providers that they accept. I don't know if this is necessarily directly related to the local search ranking factors, but if there's some way to dial in or measure user behavior around those things, like how many people are actually going and selecting some of those filters, I think that would be extremely eye-opening. Because there's no, like, that's not being captured by any rank trackers. But depending on the percentage of people that are using those, I feel like it would be very significant.
Yeah, it'd be tough to measure at this point, I think, to figure out, unless Google is telling us who's doing it, right? That would be interesting to figure out who's using those features for sure.
The closest thing I could come is those heat map studies, right, where you're just actually telling people to go perform a search. But other than that, that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah.
Joel, I'll direct this question to you. How do different industries or business types vary in terms of the ranking factors, or do they vary at all?
I think we've been talking about this for years, and I think it was highlighted as a jump in ranking factors this year, even though I know from the earliest days of Local U, we've always talked about it, which is find the sites, the niche sites that talk about your industry when you're talking about brand building. So I believe that was a jump. If I recall correctly, that was a big jump this year, but that's always been true. So it's less important to get listed on some big high ranking site and get a link from that site. It would be if I were a plumber in Yuma, California, and there was a website that was like best plumbers in Yuma, California. If that was a website, I would want to make sure I were listed on that website. It would be more important than, say, being on Yelp. Many sites might be more important than being listed on Yelp. but those being on the sites that are important to your specialty, your domain, and your location are more important than being on the big sites. And there's few big sites that matter more than that. There's a couple exceptions, Apple Maps, Google, right? Those are the few exceptions to that rule. But in general, other directories are less important than the ones that are important to your local area and to your specialty.
Cool. We have 2 questions to get through, and I'll let anyone jump into either of these 2 questions. So feel free to take the floor once I ask it. But if you could round up your top 3 findings or takeaways for our audience today from the study, what would they be? Anyone could jump in on this one.
I guess I'll just go really quickly. So for me, it was the quality of local links, or basically, yeah, the quality of local links. I'm personally a fan, kind of like what Joel was saying with citations. It's like your local citations. I mean, we've done tests internally where we found out that actually moves the needle. really well. And also local links, local links for local businesses. It makes a ton of sense. So I was glad to see that there. And the other thing I was really glad to see was about internal linking. Internal linking is extremely powerful and always has been, really. But we see it being neglected a lot. And so, yeah, make sure you're doing that, especially to your service pages, like we were discussing earlier. And then finally, I was just really happy to see that that we were talking about suspensions and leading causes there. I agreed with almost all the points that were on there. So, what about you, Colin?
Yeah, maybe the top takeaway would be that proximity to the searcher and primary category, because the two P's are still king of the castle if you look at all the local pack factors. However, as Joel was like alluding to, keywords in the business name there's situations where that can overpower and like break that moat. We still see situations all the time where, for whatever reason, maybe Joel knows the answer to this because it's been 14 plus years, the business name ranking power is so powerful, it can overcome, like even if you're using the wrong category, you're not closer to the searcher compared to some other listings, it can still seem to overpower that. So proximity, primary category, words in the business name are still king. They rule the land when it comes to the local pack ranking factors.
And then for our last question, could each of you share one actionable recommendation or best practice for improving local search rankings in 2023?
You want to start off, Joel?
Joel, let's start with you.
Yeah, so invest in the lowest cost, highest ROI thing you can do. So if you're not looking at your Google business, one of the reasons why Google Business Profile is always the biggest deal thing is because it's usually the lowest cost thing you can do. If you haven't looked at your categories, look at your categories. If you haven't added services, add services. They're very easy to do, just do it, right? Then the next thing is, hey, have I written content on my website? Have I added service pages to my website? Those are relatively low cost things to do. Start investing in those things if you haven't done it yet. Have I added the right title tags to my website? There's a question from Faison on the thing. Are keywords in a URL a myth? I kind of think so. They're just not a big deal. It's much more important to have things in your title tags. It's much more important to have things on your content on page, in header tags, and in links. Okay, not in the URL, but in your anchor tags and link to your website. The internal links or linking to other places. Those are much more important signals. So invest in things that are easy to invest in based on where your business is at.
Joel, while you're talking about internal links really quick, someone asked in the chat, can you give a good example of a good internal link for a service page? Yeah,
so you can think of do internal linking in one of two ways, right? Cross-linking. So say, just thinking in medical, say if I have a service page for if I'm a surgeon, if I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I do some minimally invasive surgery, I can talk generally about minimally invasive surgery, and then I can cross-link to various specific surgeries I do. And then I can talk about specific surgeries, and now I can go into detail about each of those specific surgeries. So I can create sub-pages for those. That's an internal linking strategy. Now I'm going to talk about shoulder surgery, and I may create depth. So I may create width, right, and depth. So think of those might be two strategies of how you think about internal linking strategies. How might I create links across my website, like cross-link things? How might I create more content depth and create down depth linking strategies?
Ben and Colin, do you guys have any takeaways or one thing you would want to leave with the audience to wrap it up?
Sure. Why not? I would say two things actually. Number one, I always like to stress is when you're thinking about SEO in general, is that you should be really optimizing for people, not just optimizing for Google. Yes, you can get tactical, you can get into the weeds, but at the end of the day, Google cares about the experience and what people are going to experience. And the last thing is definitely paying attention to the AI space. And one thing I really want to encourage everybody is to have at least one person in your organization, if not everybody in your organization, start to become learning about prompts and how to become a prompt master, basically, in their domain. I mean, we found that our SEO team has saved an amazing amount of time just by learning how to put together prompts properly. And I leave that with a quote. And that is that from an SEO perspective, is you're not going to, well, never mind. I'm not going to do that quote. It's for a different story. I'll take that back. Anyway, Colin, what about you, buddy?
Wow, what a tease, Ben. So I would say if you're a business owner and you're not currently investing in videos for your business, that is something you need to start. And I think there's the obvious reasons. YouTube's the second biggest search engine. It gets an ungodly amount of activity, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing we've noticed that the actual, if you pay attention to the actual traffic that's coming to the website, specifically from the video section of Google search, which you can track and filter inside Search Console, especially for healthcare businesses, like there is a significant amount of traffic coming from there for businesses who have YouTube specific videos embedded on their pages. So if you're not doing that, you definitely want to think about getting some sort of video strategy, whether it's creating shorts or long form videos, or whatever's best for your industry, and embedding them on important pages on your site, specifically YouTube embeds.
Awesome. Thank you guys for all those recommendations. I think they're super helpful and all super top of mind and relevant, and help wrap up the study or the takeaways from the study really well. That wraps it up for today. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and we hope you found today's webinar to be useful. If there are any questions we didn't get to, which I did see there were a few, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. We'd also be happy to answer any questions you didn't have a chance to ask today. If you'd like to shoot us an email at hello@rioseo.com. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me for today's discussion, and a special thank you to our awesome panelists, Colin, Ben, and Joel, for taking the time to be here with us today. We will be sending out a recording shortly, so you can listen again, or you can share it with your colleagues who weren't able to attend. Thank you. It was my pleasure to moderate today's discussion, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Ben and Colin.
Bye.
Bye.